7. Homelessness of the soul. Durank slept well into the night, but not through it. The distant yipping shrieks of some long-distant hunting pack woke him, and in the star-litten blues of hazy pre-dawn reminded him that he was not safe. A shroud of hopeless dread and gnawing disgust still hung heavy over him, and for a long while, still hazy with exhaustion, he lay in the shadow of the well and considered it would be best to lay in shame and wait to be found. But Durank, in those minutes spent looking up at a sky lightening with the approach of dawn, and breathing against his thundering heart as if he had only just finished his day's flight, could not remove his mind from texts chanted and sermons delivered to him in the Temple of the Sun as a boy. Though his eyes were skyward, they seemed to glare past that vista, and he saw in the place beyond the streets of Lower Sigirkar, that ageless city of his birth, where he had run and fought and laughed as a boy. And he heard not the distant yipping and yowling of foreign beasts on the hunt, but the words of a priest of the sun, who had, more than a decade ago, spoken before him and others of his caste upon their graduation from the king's academies. The words were as fresh to him in the shadow of that still and desolate homestead as the noise of shells or the iron scent of fresh-spilled blood. And let it not be forgotten that he who risks life and limb in defense of home is the most prized of Gazurgu, the Lord of the Hearth. It is this duty which will, should need call, rule your days beneath his light, the knowledge that the hearths of your fathers and of your wives and of your sons are behind you when you stand on the walls of his land. To bleed on those battlements is as righteous to him as the maintenance of your hearth, or the maintenance of your fields, or the maintenance of your families. And just as a father who forsakes his young is damned in the eyes of the Lord of the Hearth, so too is he who would forsake his post uncontested, and neither man shall ever find solace with him. Durank would like to believe that this was not direct recitation, that it was a fabrication of a soul shaken to its breaking point, one of shame and fear and loathing. But though Durank would not have been able to recall it in such depth only weeks ago, it rang in his skull now with all the surety the shells of Sholo Shaidi had carried, and he knew it to be accurate down to the last sentence. And he became certain, as he repeated that passage dragged up from the dark of his inner mind, that he was watched, that, though the sun was not yet risen, the golden gaze of his Maker was upon him. But not in the way Gazurgu had favored the heroes of old. This was a gaze of sorrow, of pity, of callous disappointment. It was not a pleasant sensation. He felt naked, broken, weak. He was weak, he thought. But crucially, even if it were solely the workings of his mind rather than the hand of his god, he no longer felt alone. Durank rose. He walked into a barn attached to the main flat-topped home place and carried from within it a scythe, the first tool of suitable scale which came to him in the dark. And he faced north, towards the still distant cackling of strange mouths on the light southward wind. Gripping the old haft and liking the weight of it, he began to walk towards them. It is just I should die with a tool of the land in my hand, he thought. He strode long and with purpose, not jogging, but pacing out along a length of stone fencing between fields. Some had been mown or harvested, for the climate of Gunug was at the whim of the Pillar of Dawn in the capital, rather than any mark of latitude or current. The first of Gunug's 2 harvest seasons had been in full swing when the war had started, and the wheat and barley was being gathered, mostly by hand, in the ancient fashion. But some fields had not even been started in on, the families having been directed west across the hinterland to the safety of the inner walls. He could only imagine what shame the tinders of the land must have felt to leave the ground wasted. The pastures were filled with sheep and goats and cattle, too heavy and too numerous to be deported with their masters. They were not grazing careless and free, but bunched into the corners of their pasturage, bleating and whining with the fear of beasts wakened to the danger of an oncoming storm. And Durank knew why. Even he, who was far too young to have ever experienced the hordes of the eastern grasslands firsthand, could not mistake the noises of slaughter and revelry which rolled over the low hills. Perhaps he, like these beasts of the fields, harbored some long-dormant genetic recollection of them, of the terrors those calls heralded. And yet, still blind to the weight of his solitude, Durank strode steady and firm as if the herds were set to form up and march with him. There was smoke on the horizon, made evident by the brightening sky. The alien shrieks and laughter grew more shrill and defined with each step. And there were other sounds, too, of terror rather than mirth or mockery, from a mouth much less foreign to his ears. He doubted stragglers en route to the west would be this far behind. It was more likely these were some family or town who'd refused the summons to withdraw, and by cruel twist of fortune, it was not the Shaishans which had found them, but their ravenous terror scouts. And as shrill and vile hyena song grew louder, so too did the frightened cries, subtle but unmistakable. A single youthful voice. His imagination painted horrible scenes which must be unfolding unseen far before him. The Kandari, it was often recalled, did not delineate between combatant or civilian when on the hunt, and their packs liked to eat while the prey still moved. Durank stumbled on the source of the wailing before he ever found himself looking down on a raider-ravaged town or home place. As he crested one of the low swells in the land, he saw her wandering the short-grazed grass about the roots of a lone, scraggly date palm which grew up from a dip in the fields. She was a girl of no more than 3 or 4, he would guess. It was her proximity to him which had made those cries audible, and he thanked the oncoming sun that she was not surrounded by riders with rifle and glinting spear atop iron-jawed monsters, as he had anticipated. But it was clear immediately that she was not all right. Not wounded, but not present either. She stumbled and clasped at the air, and the simple nightclothes she still wore were filthy with the dust and dirt of what, for a child with such small stride, would have been a long, tumultuous run. Durank dropped the scythe and ran to her, trying to shush and quiet her. The Kandari away north might well be too busy feasting and burning and singing to have heard the girl, or noticed her escape, but the packs of slinking hyena which trailed their Nyena mounts might well be ranging the plains nearby, searching for more easy meat. Startled as she was, she did subdue the noise a little, but not entirely. She approached and tried to take his hand, mutely motioning northward for the hill, and the noise of beastly indulgence beyond. For a moment, Durank was bloody-minded again, ready to kill and be killed. He threw a look over his shoulder for the scythe, but he knew almost immediately he could not go back for it. To walk with the girl towards the site of whatever slaughter awaited them there meant she too would be eaten, likely while she still drew breath. And ashamed as Durank felt, as much as he desired to redeem himself after his thoughtless flight, this could no longer be the path to that redemption. He pulled back, gentle but firm, holding the girl in place. "We can't," he told her, his eyes scanning the crests of hills for movement as he spoke in hushed tones. "We have to go. What's your name?" The girl did not answer. Her wide, tearful gaze was still northward, and she could not steadily breathe through the heaving but stifled sobs that shook her. She did not blink. "Come," Durank said. He hesitated a moment, still scanning, as he repeated, "We have to go. We have to." He lifted her to his shoulders, expecting her to fight, but she did not. As he scaled the gentle hill, this time southwest, gaze ever thrown to and fro in search of threat, he almost wished she had. There was something crushing in the quiet of her surrender, something which, though he would not have grasped it then, reminded Durank of his own. Soon he was running again, not at the near sprint he had maintained for so long the day prior in his panic and shame, but fast enough. His legs and shins and head ached, and his lungs burned with effort, but his pace was dictated by the girl more than his exhaustion. Dawn broke, and the sun reared up higher in the huge sweep of crystal sky above. A half-hour passed, their backs to the scaling sun as he turned truly west, the noises of Kandari chatter now far distant to him once more. He hugged stone fences and any line of palms or flowering trees which might break up their silhouettes from a distance, always paranoid over the prospect of running into more forerunners of the main Sholoshaishan host ahead. His heart leapt in his chest when he came out onto a broad expanse of scythed wheat and saw far off to his right, the better part of a mile distant, a roving band of hundreds of riders. But a frantic moment's squinted observations told him they were his own. Garbed in blue and gold, with gilded solar banners gently playing in the morning breeze, the stoutly built barded lions on which they rode trotting soundless over the plain. 2 of their number broke off, apparently having seen him as well, and kicked the beasts up to a run. Durank slowed to a walk, but continued west, knowing full well they would soon overtake him. They had sidled up in the matter of a minute, and were pacing alongside him, not threatening, but cautious. Rifles were slung at their backs, lances glinted in their hands, and the cuirasses they wore shimmered bronze and gold in the sun. Their helms, equally dazzling, framed the swell of their gold-plated manes, and lent their eyes a menace by way of the shadows cast by the bronze brow. "Where are you coming from?" one of them asked. "Did you not heed the call to withdraw?" Durank froze a moment, uncertain what to say. He was not in uniform, of course. The rider must have taken him to be some laborer or field hand fleeing with a daughter in tow. His mind raced, and for a moment, despite all Gazorgu's tenets abhorring the twisting of truth, he considered lying. But he did not linger long, seeing the need for haste in the cavalryman's stern eyes. "No," Durank told him. "I've come from the first wall. I found the girl near a burned settlement, east. Kandari took it, by the sounds of them." "Sir Girkar has not given orders for any of the garrison to withdraw from the first wall," the second rider observed, eyes narrowed. "No," Durank agreed, somber. "They have not." There was a pause which felt painfully long. The riders looked from Durank to the girl, still panting her sorrows and stifled gasps and sobs on his shoulders, then to each other. A particularly shrill swell in the distant cackling rose on the wind, and their eyes drifted east, where their company was still headed, silent and stalking, seeking a fight. "Turn southwest," the first rider said, motioning with his lance. "Run on as best you can. There's a forward staging base about 30 miles off, a bit after you hit the road west from Kisurazig. They're gathering the last stragglers and coordinating our scouting excursions before we pull back behind the last wall. Get the girl there." Durank nodded, asking, "There are priests there?" "Yes," came the answer. "When you've seen to the girl, go seek your peace with them." Durank nodded again. The cavalrymen wheeled off and their lions sped to make the ranks once more. Durank followed their example and broke back into his steady run, tracing the way the rider had pointed. The night before, a blind terror and self-pity had so consumed him that he had felt neither tired nor pained, and the miles had melted away beneath him. Today, he was not so fortunate, and the travel was torturous, with each juddering fall of his still bare feet in the open grassland making him yearn for rest he could not take. And so he thought long as he ran, desperate to distract himself from the struggle, praying and reminding himself he deserved every ounce of the ragged weariness he now bore. In time, he came to the Kasurazig road, though the city which gave the route its name was certainly by now a husk far behind him. He was glad that its people had been largely moved west before even the Sholoshaishan guns had begun their roaring. He shuddered to think how many they would now be carrying off in binds to their great temple away south if the evacuations had been delayed. How many, he wondered, had broken as he did, but not run so far or so fast? How many soldiers had been captured? It was afternoon when a town came into view, not abandoned, as so many had been, but alive with the bustle and cook fires and exhaust of an army camp. He quickened his pace and was soon in the shadows of its low buildings. He was met by a number of guardsmen at the perimeter of the settlement and slowed to allow them their questions. As with the lion riders, Durank fought back the urge to lie, to lower himself to an even baser level than he already occupied. He told them of his flight and of his meeting with the girl, and two of them broke away at his request to show him where she could be taken to safety. They guided him to a small water temple in town, fenced by shaded pools beneath towering old date palms, and waited by the door as he pushed inside. The main hall of worship within had been filled with cots and carts, a makeshift field hospital. Precious few beds were occupied. A younger woman, a sister among the priestesses of Laut, trotted over to meet him. "You and your daughter arrived just in time," she told him. "We're packing up to leave west by nightfall." "She isn't mine," Durank said clumsily. "I found her, out on the plains." The girl on his shoulders was fastened to his skull, her fingers locked about his forehead. She was no longer jolted by the gasps and lurches of uncontrollable sorrow, but rather hung quiet and cowed. He reached up, gently grasping her about the waist and hoisting her to the tiled ground. She lingered near his leg, eyes still wide and unblinking, uncertain. "What's her name?" "I don't know," Durank said. "She hasn't spoken." "Her family?" The young priestess looked up at him with eyes as wide as the child's. Durank shook his head no, just once, subtle, almost imperceptible. A darkness came into her face. But when the priestess spoke again, it was in a voice as soothing as a cool stream beneath scorching sun, taking the wordless girl by the ragged shoulder of her nightclothes and leading her off into the temple. "Come now," she said. "We'll get you washed. You've had a long trip, I'll bet, but you're safe now." Durank watched them go, silent, thankful. Then he turned for the door and found the two riflemen who'd guided him paying that same attention to him. "Come with us," one of them said. Durank did as he was told. They led him out into the street, and then through a cluster of interconnected clan homes towards a more austere temple, a small, simple ziggurat only several times taller than the surrounding houses, built in mimicry of the great heart of the priesthood in Sirgirkar. They climbed the stairs and halted at the entrance. One of Durank's guides, his guards more accurately, pushed into the smoky, incense-scented interior. After several minutes, he returned and motioned Durank inside. "Our chaplain will see you right away," he told Durank. "He's waiting for you in the Hall of Worship." The interior of the fire temple was thick and hot. Durank strode as tall and straight as he could manage, but the solemn surroundings, even if they were modest by comparison to the temples in the capital he had grown attending, beat what little bearing he could summon up out of him. He emerged from a short, broad corridor into a large hall of blue and gold and deepest reds. Smoke poured up from a central brazier and flowed out through vents in the roof overhead. But the atmosphere remained tinged by the hint of it, and the air in the room was hazy and shimmering. Two men, one in the blue and gold of an army chaplain, and another in the gilt robes of a ranking priest of Gazurgu, sat cross-legged on the tiles opposite him, their features obscured by the heat haze given off by the fire. "Come and sit," the chaplain called to him. Durank obeyed. He saw as he took his place that the chaplain was a younger man than he, perhaps early 20s, fresh out of his priestly education. The true priest, likely the master of the temple rather than any military man, was much older. Though, Durank would have to admit, most priests of Gazurgu far enough into their service to have undergone the ritual of gazing seemed far beyond their years. The priest's mane was graying, his muzzle dulled, and his eyes bleached white, any color or pupil having long been seared away. But the older man, just as any ranking priest of Gazurgu, was not blind, not in the sense that most men would understand. Their right of looking long into the very heart of the fabled Pillar of Dawn in Surgirkar stripped them of their earthly vision, but such priests did see, after a fashion. And in some ways, they perceived far more than their younger comrades, who had yet to be given the gift of what they termed true sight. The priest tracked Durank with his seemingly sightless eyes as he moved, and bored into him as a cowed and nervous Durank sat waiting for either he or the chaplain to speak. He tried not to meet those milky eyes. "You came from the first wall, then," the chaplain finally said. He looked out over this bedraggled newcomer's filthy underclothes and ragged appearance for some time in the dancing light. His grim expression never lightened as he asked, "Your rank?" "Lieutenant," Durank told him. The chaplain shook his head, exhaling. "Where are you from, Lieutenant?" "Surgirkar," Durank said. "You have family there?" "No," Durank answered. "The extended clan, but that's all." "No wife or children," the chaplain said, seemingly to himself, nodding. "It's no wonder you buckled, then. I've said for some time a man shouldn't be given a commission if he had nothing to die for behind him. You all say you'll bleed for your king or your people, but few of us know our king, and none of us but Gazurgu himself knows all our people. If you had a face to pair with home, perhaps you would have been willing to die for it." The chaplain sat with his eyes cast down for a while, thinking. Durank watched him, but he could not help but notice at the very edge of his vision that the older, silent priest was still boring into him with those uncanny, milky eyes, the elder's face strange in the shifting shadows cast by the flame. "I was told you arrived here with a girl," the chaplain finally said. "An orphan. You carried her. I don't know what she or her family was doing not abdicating the eastern hinterland, but Laut's priestesses will see to her, raise her as one of them, if no broader clan relations can be found. I thank you for carrying her, whoever she might be. If it were not for that, I would have little doubt about what comes next. Even considering the child, though, you and I both know what the solar law demands be done to deserters." Durank nodded. He did not plead or argue his case. His orders, as with all those on the first wall, had been to hold the wall or die in its defense. Even if it fell, his higher-ups had reiterated all those dreadful days ago. Every minute of delay the Sholoshaitians could be given would be a boon to those organizing the inner defenses. Though Durank had stood alone, he had still been able to stand, and he had not done what had been asked of him. It did not matter, not to him, and certainly not to a chaplain of Gazurgu, whether he had consciously decided to break. His love of home had not been strong enough. But even if he had been weak in his hour of trial, he was not weak now. Just as it had been that morning, Durank did not feel alone before his two stony-faced judges, and he was ready to weather what came. "You'll travel west with us tonight," the chaplain told him. "I'll carry out your sentence myself, when we've settled in on the second wall and you've been given your final rites." The chaplain began to rise, but a single wizened, bent finger of the elder priest beside him waved the youth back down, and he froze at once. The milky eyes leaned in close in the ululating flash and shade of the brazier, and looking back for the first time directly into them, it took all Durank's strength not to shuffle backward away from them. Though he knew the priest was a man of his maker, it did not lessen the discomfort he felt. There was something of the beginning of all things shimmering there in the firelight reflected off those moistened, staring, not quite lifeless eyes. "I will take him," the priest said, addressing the chaplain without looking at him. The chaplain's eyes widened as he asked, "You see something?" "Yes," the priest answered. "He will not be killed. He has things yet to do. But he will be remade." Now it was the chaplain who was quiet, as the older man leaned and craned, seeming to drink in every inch of Durank in the glare and gloom. The priest murmured softly to himself, or perhaps to something other, saying, "Yes, and I can see that." The fire crackled behind him, and despite its heat, Durank felt naked before it.